I sat down for a long form interview with Stephen A. Smith, and we talked. He's ESPN's most prominent employee. He's actually a fan of Fox News. He'll send me a message every now and then. He watches Jesse Waters, watches Sean Hannity, good friends with Mark Levine. And I did his podcast a while back. Some of you will remember that. He did a long form interview with me. I think you guys will enjoy it. We will populate it in the Clay and Buck podcast feed for those of you out there that would be intrigued to listen. But I thought this was an interesting part of our discussion. I wanted to play it for you guys, also let you hear it, Buck. Stephen A. Smith went off on how disgusted he is by woke culture and the concept of people losing their jobs for the opinions that they share. Listen.
You talked about identity politics. I got something 10 times more damaging. Woke culture. It ain't popular to say it's woke culture. Here's why woke culture is worse. Because no matter what your identity is or what my identity is, we can live in our separate worlds or we could choose to come together. Woke gets you fired if you ain't woke enough. If you don't agree with what the woke culture says it wants you to agree with. And so what happens is somebody like me, Clay Travis, might say 10 things I disagree with, but 9 of them I have no problem with. Now, if I have a problem with something, I'll say so. But the other 9 things you said, I'm like, wait a minute. He might feel differently than me, but it's perfectly within his right to say that. Is perfectly within his right to feel that way. He said absolutely nothing wrong. Why are you trying to get him fired? We got to grow up as a society and accept the fact that differences are okay as long as we're wishing the best for our fellow men and women. And we're not using every little excuse that we can to end somebody's career. Because I've made mistakes. You've made mistakes. We all have. But my God, should we lose our careers for it? I don't agree. I don't agree with that at all. And I think woke culture has instigated that kind of thinking. And that's why when you've spoken about woke culture, I've sat up there and said to people, he's right.
I think this is a big deal, Buck, because what you're seeing is people from all different backgrounds are now starting to come together and recognize that the 10% or so of American woke culture, we've talked about it a lot on this program, that are constantly trying to get people fired for the tweet that they send that doesn't come off right, or you send a Facebook message that one of your coworkers doesn't like, and all of a sudden you lose your job. I think Americans are fed up with it. White, black, Asian, Hispanic. And when you start to hear so many people speaking out against it, I think this is something the tidal wave can grow in the opposite direction. I think most people out there, you may not agree with Stephen A. Smith. You can go listen to the full hour and a half. He says lots of things that I don't agree with. And I say a lot of things that he doesn't agree with. But Buck, the conversation I think was interesting because it goes to your point, which is people who disagree used to talk. As opposed to just sit back and take pot shots at each other and presume that their other side is evil. And I think this is a part of that. And I think we're starting to see people coming together on the idea of cancel culture basically just being wrong.
Now, I do worry that this could turn into this moment that we're seeing here where wokeness has been maybe exposed even among some in the center and even some of that are left of center, that this is a strategic pause or strategic retreat at best, just because on the issues, I think they have a problem with the trans sports reality. Like this is America is not yet so insane that they're going to say, the 200-pound guy who's competing against 120 or 130-pound female athletes doesn't have an advantage, and this isn't absurd. So they're having to reevaluate and reassess. I don't think they've changed their minds, though. And I think the only way that this starts to feel like it's really moving in the right direction is if the structural power dynamics shift. What I mean by that is the building up of the parallel economy, the shifting of resources on the right into platforms that align with your values, the creation of, I think Elon Musk and X is a very good example of this, but there need to be a whole lot of others because if we're just hoping, Clay, that Disney decides that, having like pansexual cartoon characters is a little too weird to expose America's children to, they're just going to do it not do it for a year or two, and then do it again, right? I mean, you
Yeah.
have to create incentive structures and power structures that are different.
You have to create pain, honestly. And I think that's what you saw with Bud Light. I don't think Bud Light will ever do anything similar to Dylan Mulvaney again. They're now paying hundreds of millions of dollars to the UFC. I saw their new political campaign, not political campaign, their new media campaign. You know what it is, Buck? It's Peyton Manning throwing Bud Light cans around to people for free in the bar. You know, you go with the UFC, you go with Peyton Manning. That's a lot different than everything associated with the Dylan Mulvaney mess.